Federal agents moved before dawn. Helicopters circled two mansions on opposite coasts. By the time the sun rose, the man once known as the king of hip-hop business was standing outside his own home, watching strangers carry out his life in evidence bags. 6 months later, he would be in handcuffs. A year after that, a jury would decide his fate. How does someone build one of the most powerful empires in entertainment history and end up here? To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning. Sean Combs grew up in Harlem and Mount Vernon, New York, the son of a mother who worked multiple jobs to give him opportunities. He attended Howard University, dropped out, and talked his way into an internship at Uptown Records. He didn't wait for permission to rise. He created his own label, Bad Boy Records, in 1993. And within a few years, he had reshaped the sound of American music. He discovered and developed some of the most influential artists in hip-hop and R&B history. He didn't just produce records. He built a brand around himself, turning Puff Daddy and later P. Diddy, and later still simply Diddy, into a name synonymous with ambition and excess. He expanded into fashion with Sean John. He partnered with a major spirits company on a liquor brand that made him one of the wealthiest men in music. At his peak, his net worth was estimated well over $1 billion. To the outside world, he had done what almost no one else in the industry had managed. He wasn't just a star. He was the man who owned the machine. But underneath the image, allegations have been quietly accumulating for years. In November 2023, his former girlfriend, R&B singer Cassie Ventura, filed a civil lawsuit accusing him of years of abuse, including physical violence and rape. The suit was explosive, and it triggered something larger. Ventura settled with Combs within a day for $20 million. As part of that settlement, Combs admitted no wrongdoing, but the lawsuit had already opened a door that would not close. More lawsuits followed from other women and men, describing a pattern of coercion and violence. Business partners began to distance themselves. He stepped down from the media company he chaired. Long-standing brand relationships began to erode. And in March 2024, federal agents executed searches at his homes in Los Angeles and Miami, seizing electronics and evidence as part of a growing criminal investigation. By September of that year, Sean Combs was arrested and taken into federal custody. The empire he had spent 3 decades building was now the subject of federal indictment. Prosecutors alleged that Combs had run what they described as a criminal enterprise, using his fame, his wealth, and his inner circle to organize, and at times coerce, women into extended, drug-fueled sexual encounters he called freak-offs. The charges were severe: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and violations of century-old federal law against transporting people across state lines for prostitution. The most serious counts each carried the possibility of life in prison. Combs pleaded not guilty to everything. His defense team did not deny that his relationships had been troubled or even that he had been physically abusive at times, including in one widely seen hotel surveillance video showing him striking Ventura. Instead, they argued that toxic, sometimes violent relationships and consensual, if unconventional, sexual arrangements were not the same thing as the organized criminal trafficking scheme prosecutors described. The trial began in May 2025 in a federal courtroom in Manhattan, and it ran for nearly 2 months. Prosecutors called more than 30 witnesses, including Ventura herself and another accuser known in court only as Jane. They presented text messages, financial records, and testimony describing years of alleged manipulation, threats, and abuse. The defense called no witnesses at all. They didn't need to disprove the ugliest parts of the story. They leaned into them. Their argument wasn't that Combs had been a good partner. It was that being a bad, even abusive, partner was not the same crime as running a trafficking enterprise. They pointed to messages in which the women had, at various points, expressed enthusiasm for the encounters in question, arguing this undercut the government's narrative of coercion, even as the women testified that they had felt pressured and manipulated. After closing arguments stretched across days, the jury began deliberating. They spent more than 13 hours weighing 5 counts against him. On July 2nd, 2025, the verdict came. The jury acquitted Sean Combs of the most serious charges: racketeering conspiracy, and both counts of sex trafficking. Gasps and, in some corners of the courthouse, cheers broke out. But the jury did convict him on 2 lesser counts: transporting people across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. It was a split decision that satisfied almost no one completely. Prosecutors had lost the centerpiece of their case, but Combs was still officially a convicted felon, and he remained behind bars, as the judge denied him bail pending sentencing, citing concerns about witness safety. 3 months later, In October 2025, Combs stood before the court again. This time, there was no jury. Prosecutors asked for more than 11 years in prison. His attorneys asked for time served, about 14 months. Combs addressed the judge directly, apologizing for what he called disgusting and shameful behavior, and asking for the chance to be a father again. The judge sentenced him to 4 years and 2 months in federal prison, along with a $500,000 fine, and 5 years of supervised release afterward. So what does this case actually mean? For Sean Combs personally, it meant the collapse of nearly everything he had built. The business partnerships were already gone before the verdict came in. The reputation that had taken 30 years to construct was reduced, almost overnight, to a single contested legal outcome. Neither full vindication nor full condemnation. For the music industry, the case became something of a reckoning. It forced a public conversation about the culture of impunity that can surround powerful men in entertainment, and about how difficult it is, even with extensive evidence, for prosecutors to prove the specific legal elements of trafficking and racketeering charges in a courtroom. For the public, the verdict left a strange kind of unease. Not innocence, not the full guilt many expected. Just a man convicted of a lesser crime, having been accused but not convicted of far greater ones. And the story hasn't fully ended. Dozens of civil lawsuits remain unresolved. Reports have surfaced that Combs has personally asked the sitting president for a pardon, a request the president has publicly acknowledged receiving, while stating, as of early this year, that he was not inclined to grant it. As of this summer, that decision still hangs unresolved. One name on a much longer list the president is reportedly weighing. Sean Combs spent decades convincing the world he was untouchable. For a moment in a Manhattan courtroom, it seemed he might prove that true one final time. Instead, he became something else entirely, a reminder that empires built on image can survive almost anything, except the truth catching up to them. Power, it turns out, is not the same thing as immunity. And influence, however vast, can still find its limits in a room with 12 strangers and a single word: guilty. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.